Hey everyone, we are on the brink of something huge, a brand new industrial revolution. But this one, it's not happening here on Earth. The final frontier? It's not just for exploring anymore, it's for extracting. We're talking about space mining, and believe me, it is way closer than you might think. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so right off the bat, let's be clear about what's at stake here. This isn't just about cool scientific discoveries. No. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace literally floating right above our heads. This isn't some far-off sci-fi dream anymore. It's happening.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at this new gold rush. Then we'll dive into the original rulebook for space, the constitution of space, if you will. After that, we'll see how those rules are being bent, creating a huge global divide. Then we'll tackle the massive risks. And finally, what all this means for the future.
All right, let's jump into our first section, the new gold rush. For decades, this was pure speculation, the stuff of movies. But now, we have private companies right now actively planning honest-to-goodness missions to mine the cosmos.
And the amount of money we're talking about, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. I mean, take something like asteroid 16 Psyche. It's basically a giant floating ball of gold, iron, and nickel. Or think about the moon. It's got reserves of helium-3, which could be a total game-changer for creating clean fusion energy right here on Earth.
Okay, but here's where it gets complicated. This is the real conflict. You've got all these private companies firing up their rockets, ready to go, and this Wild West ambition is on a collision course with decades of international law. And that crash? It's creating a massive legal crisis that, honestly, we are just starting to figure out.
And that brings us perfectly to our second part, the original rulebook. Because to really get what's happening today, you have to rewind, way back to the Cold War, which is when the very first laws for space were actually written.
So this legal framework, it didn't just appear overnight. It grew over decades. It all kicked off with the big one, the Outer Space Treaty back in 1967. Then you had other agreements trying to build on that, like the Moon Agreement. But then, bam, 2015. The U.S. comes out with the Space Act, and that just changed everything, leading directly to the Artemis Accords we have today.
Okay, so this is the absolute key. Article 2 of that original treaty. It says flat out that no nation can claim sovereignty over anything in space, can't own it, can't occupy it, and for more than 50 years, everyone took that to mean one thing: no property rights. At all. End of story. Makes sense, right? If the U.S. can't own the moon, how could it give a company a permission slip to mine it?
And this whole idea was built on this really beautiful philosophy called the common heritage of mankind. It was simple, maybe a little idealistic. It said the stars, they belong to everyone, to all of us, together. Space was supposed to be a global park, not a shopping mall.
But, well, you knew there was a but coming. That ideal is now being seriously challenged. And that leads us to Section 3, the controversial loophole that's trying to flip the script for a whole new commercial era.
The entire modern debate really boils down to this one very clever distinction. It comes from that 2015 U.S. Space Act. And what it argues is, okay, sure, you can't plant a flag and claim an entire asteroid as your own. But you can own the stuff you dig out of it, the minerals, the rocks, whatever. You extract it, it's yours. It's a really clever and, incredibly controversial legal workaround.
So here's the analogy supporters always use to sell this idea. They say, hey, it's just like deep-sea fishing, right? Nobody owns the ocean, but if a fisherman goes out and catches a bunch of tuna, he owns that catch. It's his to sell. Makes sense on the surface. But the critics, they say no way. They see this as a complete assault on the entire spirit of the Outer Space Treaty.
So where does that leave us today? Well, now you have the U.S.-led Artemis Accords, which, by the way, have been signed by over 40 countries, trying to manage this whole new landscape. They've introduced this idea of safety zones around mining sites, to stop people from bumping into each other. But the big fear is that these zones could basically become property claims without calling them that. It's like a backdoor to owning territory. And you know who hasn't signed on? Russia and China. So you can see this huge geopolitical split forming. It is a very, very tricky legal tightrope to walk. And all this legal maneuvering, it's not just theory. It has very real consequences, and it's creating a massive divide. Which brings us right into Section 4, this idea of a cosmos split between the haves and the have-nots.
There was actually an attempt to stop this from happening. Way back in 1979, the Moon Agreement was put on the table. It was explicit. Space resources are the common heritage of mankind, and any profit should be shared fairly with everyone. Sounds good, right? Well, the big spacefaring nations, the US, Russia, they never signed it. They were worried it would scare away private investors.
So this leaves us with a really big, kind of moral question. Think about it. The day the world's first asteroid trillionaire is created, does that person or that company owe anything to the rest of us, to humanity? Should there be something like a space VAT, a tax on those profits that goes to help developing countries that could never afford their own space program? What do you think?
Okay, so we've talked law, we've talked ethics, but there are also just immense practical dangers here. Let's get into Section 5 and talk about the incredibly high-stakes gamble that governments are making right now.
So you need to know this term, the launching state. It's a huge deal in space law. Basically, whatever country gives a mission the green light to launch, doesn't matter if it's a government rocket or a private one, that country is on the hook for any damage it causes. And here's the kicker. That liability, it never expires. Ever. And you can just imagine the nightmare scenario, right? A private mining company makes one tiny little error, nudges an asteroid just a little bit off course. That asteroid then smashes into, say, a huge satellite network that the whole world relies on. The company? It just declares bankruptcy. But the country that launched them, they're left facing billions, maybe trillions, in lawsuits from every other country on Earth.
And it's not just about money. We have laws about planetary protection to prevent what's called harmful interference. So what if a mining operation on Mars, digging for resources, accidentally drills right through the first ever evidence of alien life, a tiny fossilized microbe or something? You can't undo that. That discovery is lost to science forever. The legal and ethical fallout would be just immeasurable.
So all of this, it brings us to our final section, the future of the frontier. Because make no mistake, we are at a major crossroads, and the decisions we're making right now are going to define what our future in space actually looks like.
What we're really watching in real time is the birth of what you might call space capitalism. That beautiful idealistic vision of space as the province of all mankind, it's being completely reforged, hammered into a new shape by the intense pressures of private money and the fact that we're running out of stuff down here on Earth.
And so that leaves us with the one big question, the one that's going to define not just this century, but maybe the rest of human history. When you look up at the night sky, what do you see? Do you see our shared heritage, something that belongs to all of us? Or do you see the next great piece of real estate, just waiting to be sold to the highest bidder? The thing is, that choice is being made as we